Hey guys, it's Miss Caso. I just wanted to do a quick video so that you guys had something to reference when we're talking about pre-writing. So this week we are talking about the 5 steps of pre-writing. Just to review, we've got the writing process, which is pre-writing, writing, and rewriting. So you guys have heard these steps before. I'm just trying to make sure you can see me over there. You've heard these steps before. You've probably heard things like brainstorming, drafting, and revision. But these are the 3 steps of the writing process so far as our classes are concerned. So we condense them into 3 easy to remember terms. So for today, we're going to be going over the 5 steps of pre-writing. Okay? But before we do that, we want to go over why we pre-write to begin with. So pre-writing is actually upwards of 70% of the writing process. So brain research tells us that before you get to the drafting stage, you need to spend a significant amount of time developing ideas. It's called content generation. So you get a lot of ideas, typically chaotically, down on paper before you even get to the drafting stage. So this includes things like brain dumps, cluster maps, also called bubble maps, talking out your ideas with other people's and taking their ideas for free during the pre-writing phase, and then doing preliminary research, which essentially is Google and Wikipedia. So we pre-write and spend all this time on pre-writing generation so that by the time we get to the drafting stage, we don't get stuck. So very often students, myself included, have pulled up a Word doc or we've pulled up a Google Doc and we haven't done a significant amount of pre-writing. And so we either get stuck staring at that blank page or we write a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't make any sense, kind of stream of conscious all over the place, extremely chaotic and disorganized, and it's kind of shooting ourselves in the foot because we have to go back and then reorganize it when we could have just pulled stronger ideas and outlined them before we get to the drafting stage. So that's why we pre-write in a nutshell, is to get lots of content down on paper for us to pull the strongest points out and then put them in pieces of writing, such as the intellectual reaction paragraphs that you guys are working on now. But also eventually when you're doing your research papers, it's developing lots of content for you to pull your topics, for you to pull the strongest examples to explain those topics, etc. Okay, so there's 5 steps of pre-writing. So I have combined these 5 steps from research that I did in grad school that talked about the teaching of writing and the process of writing and how we should approach it as student learners. But I also organize it in a very specific way because I've found over my years of teaching that this is the most beneficial to students. Okay, so step 1 is what's called a brain dump. Okay, step 1 is what's called a brain dump. So brain dump has also been referred to as a free write. Okay, it's any and all ideas in your brain now dumped on the page. Okay, so this is the first step of pre-writing for a couple reasons. One is that free writing, if you remember maybe in elementary school or middle school when your teacher would have you do this, she or he would set a timer, say it was 5 minutes, and you had to write for that full 5 minutes. And if you couldn't think of anything to write, you would just say the same word over and over again. And there's research behind that. So you can't focus on what you're going to draft, and you can't focus on a thesis, or you can't focus on a topic paragraph if you have all kinds of other stuff going on up in your brain. So what brain research tells us to do is to clear that out in a no pressure kind of environment in order to focus on a piece of writing. So we call that brain dump. If you think of a dump truck, like you have all of this mess up here, right? And you literally dump it on a page. So brain dumps can include bullet points. They can be complete sentences if you want. So I'll give you an example of a student doing a brain dump and receiving full credit. So we were talking about the prison industrial complex last semester. And you don't have to know what that is, but most of us know what prisons are. So when we did a brain dump, we timed it for 2 minutes. That's important as well. All pre-writing is timed to cut you off, right? So you're not spending 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour on a brain dump when you really are just trying to get yourself somewhat organized on a topic. So again, we were doing prison industrial complex, and this student's brain dump sounded something like this. I don't know what industrial complex means. I do know what prisons mean. Prisons are places where criminals go. Criminals are people who commit crimes. I'm really hungry. I don't know why we're doing this. What is this next step of pre-writing? Caso, this sucks. Like, it was literally something like that. And she got 100. I mean, she got 100 for her brain dump because it's literally just taking what's in your brain now and dumping it on the page. Okay, so our next step of pre-writing is called clustering. Okay, so we've got brain dump up here, that's the first stage, and clustering down here. Let me see if this, there we go, that one's better. So you have brain dump first for your 2 minutes, and then you're gonna cluster for 2 minutes, okay? So a cluster, if you guys have done bubble maps, okay, that's typically what students remember it as, is a bubble map. So the thing to remember about clustering is while brain dumping is just anything and everything, you're trying to focus on a topic, but you don't have to stay on topic, if that makes sense, because you're just trying to dump everything out. Bubble map takes 1 point from the brain dump and puts in a middle bubble. Okay, so you take 1 point from your brain dump and you put it in the middle bubble. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. Oh no! This eraser is horrible. Okay, let's try to do it up here. I'm going to do an example brain dump. Okay, so if I have a brain dump, and for instance, today in English 111, we were talking about what makes America or what makes American. So I'll put my topic at the top, right? What makes America, America or an American, right? And so I'm trying to stay on this topic, but if I don't, it's okay. So I'm going to start a brain dump. I'm only going to look at this clock in here and set it for about a minute just so you can kind of see what it looks like when you dump everything on the page, okay? So I'm at 11:06 now. I'm going to show you what brain dump looks like. I'm going to try to stay on topic here. What makes an American? North America, South America. We just talked in my class about consumerism. I'm going to talk about Native Americans. Racism, maybe also with the prison system. I heard an NPR article today about Black students suspended 4 times more likely than white students. I also think of cheese, American cheese, when I think of this. I also think that I'm hungry and I want my lunch early. But then I would have no lunch, and that makes me sad. And something else about American, we'll say freedom. Okay? So this is what a brain dump looks like. Some of you guys like to do it in complete sentences. That's totally fine. I like doing it in bullet points just because I feel like I can get more out that way. But for your grade, if you just get something down and it's from your brain, then you get 100. Okay? Now I'm going to show you what clustering looks like. All right, so I have one thing from my brain dump, right? That's where we start with the cluster. Brain dump is chaotic and crazy. Cluster is small and more focused, I should say. All right, so let me take something from over here. I'm going to take consumerism, okay? And then I'm going to do an example of it over here. So if I'm doing cluster, again, this is a cluster, okay? And I'm going to put consumerism in the middle bubble, and then from there I'm going to set my timer again. So I'm at 11:08 right now, so I'm gonna do it for 1 minute just to show you guys. Okay, so consumerism, I can talk about buying lots of stuff, and also in pre-writing, spelling doesn't matter, grammar doesn't matter, it's just getting all the ideas on the paper. Okay, so buying lots of stuff. When I think of consumerism, I think of debt. People have school debt, they have cars, they have houses, etc. Okay, what else with consumerism? I saw a documentary about fast fashion and how that affects Malaysian workers and how H&M is guilty of it, etc. Okay, so what clustering does for you that's different from brain dump is that a brain dump is just totally random, right? Like all this stuff right here is just totally random. When you get to clustering, you are actually trying to see the relationship between ideas. So if you look at this, if I were to put all of these details together, I would have a sentence, okay? And that would help me for my IRs, my academic paragraphs, or it could help me later on when I'm trying to find a topic and then examples to explain it. So let's say I wanted to put all this in a sentence, right? Consumerism includes fast fashion. Fast fashion is the idea that American consumers want to buy shirts or pants or accessories for really cheap, so they'll wear it once and then they'll throw it away, right? But because we have this obsession with fast fashion, it affects Malaysian workers, and one of the companies that does this the most egregiously is H&M. Okay, so you see how I just made a connection through all those ideas, and I could do it the opposite way too. So consumerism puts people in debt, right? And I don't know if you can see this, but I'm going to say it to you. Consumerism puts people in debt, such as their education, their cars, and their houses. So that's brain dump, and that's cluster. Okay, so brain dump is really, really random, and with cluster, you're just starting to put a little organization onto those ideas. Okay, so you can see how they work together. All right, so I'm going to erase this side. Okay. So we have brain dump, we have cluster, and I'm going to put 3, 4, and 5 over here. So don't get confused. It's a little weird with the video flipping it. So first step is brain dump, 2 minutes, right? Second step is clustering, 2 minutes. The third step is what's called looping, okay? Looping, okay. And so with looping, it's a new point from either the brain dump or the cluster, okay? So the thing to remember with looping is, if you think about it, I like to explain it like that game Slitherow, if you guys have ever played that. My daughter's a big fan of playing that game. So whereas a cluster goes out, so if you think of like a vineyard and it has clusters and clusters and clusters of grapes, when you think about looping, a loop stays within itself. So it gets more and more and more and more and more specific until you literally can't say anything else about it. So it looks like this, like in that Slitherow game, my daughter will be a really big worm, right? And then she's got like a little worm here. And in that game, she will circle them and circle them and circle and circle and circle and circle and circle until she kills them, and then she gets to eat all the little orbs that they become, okay? So the point is that a loop goes into itself to a finite point, which means you literally can't say anything else about it, okay? So it is also 2 minutes. I'm trying to keep my color scheme here so y'all don't get confused. It is also 2 minutes. So at this point, you guys have spent 2 minutes on a brain dump, right? 2 minutes on a cluster, 2 minutes on looping. That's only 6 minutes of your lives. And yet we already have a bunch of content down on our papers, right? And that's what we're going for. Pre-writing, again, 70% of the writing process. So if you follow these steps, you're going to be so much less frustrated when you get to your first drafts or revised drafts, because you have so much content already written down in your papers. And so you can be really selective about strong topics, good detailed examples, those kinds of things. Okay, so now we're going to practice looping. So looping can take a new point from brain dump or from cluster. Okay, and we're only going to loop twice, but just so you know, you can loop more and more as you need to, okay? So you set it up like this. So you've got loop 1, and then you've got loop 2, okay? So you've got loop 1 and loop 2. So I'm going to pull something new from brain dump or cluster. Now I know I erased my brain dump, but I remember, let me see, so we're still with this topic, right? What makes America, or what makes an American? And I'm going to take the North American and South American, because I haven't talked about that. I'm going to put North American, South American, and I'm going to make that the topic of loop 1. Does that make sense? We're not doing anything with loop 2 yet, just doing loop 1. So then I set my timer, 2 minutes for loop 1. I'm actually only going to do 1 minute so I can show you guys for the sake of time. But just know you set your timer for 2, right? And you only stay on loop 1. So I do bullet points, you do you, but I do bullet points. It helps me stay organized. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. 11:14 on the clock right now, so 1 minute, let me loop. So North American, South American. So I'm going to put Canada and Mexico Americans too. That makes me think of immigration laws. That makes me think of the wall that's being argued in Congress right now, the reason for the government shutdown, right? So I'm going to add that too. Government shutdown. I'm going to talk about cost of, and look at me, I'm just doing an arrow, right, to keep myself, because I can do that because it's my pre-writing. So doing an arrow because I'm talking about the cost of the wall. And then I'm going to talk about illegal immigration. Okay, and now I'm actually already through my first loop because I set it for 1 minute just to show you guys, right? You'll set it for 2, just so you know, but I set it for 1 just to show you. So do you see how loop 1, I've got bullet points, right? So I'm going to take something from loop 1 and I'm going to put it up here and loop again. And what you're going to see is that I'm going to get stuck, okay? When you loop so specifically that at some point you're going to get stuck, and that's fine, okay? That doesn't mean that, you know, you don't know what you're doing or you're not smart enough to do this. It doesn't mean any of that. We all get stuck the more we loop something because you literally only have so much to say about a topic before you've kind of beat a dead horse, right? So loop 1, I'm going to pick something from here. I'm going to put it up to loop 2. So I think I'm going to do, let's do the wall since that's relevant, okay? So I'm going to put the wall, and then just to remind myself, I'm going to put Trump there, okay, because he's the one that's calling for it. The reason that the budget isn't getting passed because he wants the wall and the Democrats don't want to pay for the wall. So that's kind of the current event going on right now. I set it up for the top of loop 2. I set my timer again. I'm going to do it for 1 minute. You're going to do it for 2 minutes, right? So just to show you, I'm going to do it for 1 minute. Okay, so 1 minute on the clock. It's 11:16 and go. So the wall, 5.6 billion. I heard that it was originally 5.6 billion, and now some of the projections are 20 to 25 billion. Okay, so it is causing Americans not to get paid. So see how in this loop I actually have more sentences than I did bullet points over here. So the government shutdown again. I know that the Coast Guard specifically is not getting paid. See, I'm kind of stuck right now. I'm like, so where else can I go with the wall? I know that it's supposed to prevent illegal immigration, and even though I don't know that I agree with that, I'm going to put that on my loop. Now, what I want to show you, because that actually was my minute, okay, is that this one is longer than this one. See that? So the more you loop something, so let's say I had a loop 3 and I wanted to pull cost, okay? Well, there's only so much I can say about cost, right? So cost of the Border Patrol to actually patrol that wall, cost of materials to actually build that wall, cost of enforcing, well, I guess I would go with Border Patrol, but cost of enforcement, those kinds of things. And then I'm kind of done with cost. So looping helps you with pre-writing because it's when you want to get really specific about something. You just want to see it from all aspects as far as you can go, okay? So that's looping. So let's go over the 3 steps so far, okay? So you've got brain dump, which is anything and everything just dumped on a page, right? It can be on topic, it can be slightly off topic, it's completely up to you. Bullet points, misspellings, grammar mistakes, it doesn't matter. It's just you, okay? You're the only person that's really benefiting from your pre-writing because it's your ideas on paper and you get to kind of pick through them. Brain dump, cluster, which is your bubble map. Okay, so your bubble map, we have one over here. You take one thing from the brain dump, put it in that middle bubble, and then you cluster out for 2 minutes. Third step is looping. Loop 1, 2 minutes. Loop 2, 2 minutes. The thing with looping, though, is that loop 2 and loop 3 and loop 4 and loop 5, however many times you loop, have to stay within loop 1, right? So loop 1 pulls over to loop 2, and then you have to take one thing from loop 2, put it into loop 3. One thing from loop 3, and we have nothing else to say, right? So that's how that works. Okay, so brain dump, cluster, and looping. And then I'm actually going to erase this side to put, so y'all can pause it if you need to get that example. Good Lord, y'all, this eraser. Okay, and I erased half of my stuff up here. Okay, so from either brain dump or cluster. Okay. All right. Your fourth type of pre-writing is conversation. Okay. Is conversation. And I tell my students, get someone to do your homework for you. Okay. So you literally hand them their notebooks. Hand over notebook. And tell your peer or family member, whoever that person is, to write their responses to your brain dump, cluster, and loops. Okay? So they literally write their responses. Okay? You guys see that? So that's a way if you guys are studying in the library, or let's say that you're at home and you just like take a picture really quick and you shoot it to a friend and you're like, hey, can you look over this and just tell me what your responses would be? If you're doing it over text or you're doing it orally, so you guys are having a conversation in person, then you're writing down their responses. Okay? So that's the other way. So conversation is also literally have a conversation. Okay, and what I tell my students is to steal. Okay, so there is no such thing in the pre-writing process as plagiarism because ideas are free at this point. We always learn better in groups because not only are humans social creatures, but we have our own perspectives and our own experiences that limit our ability to react to a text, if that makes sense. And so when you widen that perception or you widen that pool of experiences to another person, they're going to give you new information and new ways of looking at things that you didn't consider before. Okay, so if they're giving you literally new stuff, then you're taking that and you're putting it in your notebooks as well, or your Google Doc or wherever you're doing this on, right? So conversation, the point of it is to get someone else's perspective. So outside of yourself, you've done brain dump, cluster, and looping all in your own mind. Conversation brings you out, right? And then the final step of pre-writing, look at this, is research. Okay? The final step of pre-writing is research. So research comes in two forms. You have what's called preliminary research, and then you have formal research, okay? This one comes first, and this one comes second. Oh, let me back up a little bit to the timer. I forgot to put timers on these. So with conversation, I mean, a good rule of thumb is just to go until the conversation is done, right? So we don't typically like go to our spouse or go to our children or go to a friend and say, you have 5 minutes, go. Like we don't typically do that. But a good rule of thumb, if you're on a time crunch or whatever, is 5 to 10 minutes talking to somebody, okay? Because it gives you time enough to get to the depth that you want. You know, if you, for instance, we're watching Childish Gambino's This Is America video, which we did in class today, and you only watched it once, and you only gave the other person 5 minutes to really dig into the symbolism in that video, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot because there's so much symbolism there. Why would you limit the other person by saying, hey, 5 minutes and done, right? So just know, time crunch, 5 to 10 minutes. If you can go longer, you're going to get more out of it, which means you're getting more content in your notebooks or on your Google Doc or wherever, which means you have more to pull from when you're writing your paragraphs, your intellectual reactions, your topic paragraphs in your paper, whatever, okay? All right, so research is kind of the same thing. Preliminary research is 5 to 10, well, I did that weird, sorry. Is 5 to 10 minutes, okay? And what we mean by preliminary, y'all, is Google and Wikipedia, okay? Typically just Google, okay? So when you're dealing with, say, a topic like what is American, then you literally pull Google up, and this is preliminary research, right? So this is what you do first. No pressure, doesn't have to be scholarly. We all do this. We're like, I think I know what that means, but let me throw it into Google and see what bites me back. So you throw it in there. What does it mean to be an American? And then you get, you know, like all these web pages that come up, and you kind of click through and you're skimming. Totally appropriate. So then you're stealing as well, right? Now, make sure that if you end up citing from these sources, you would need to copy and paste a web link and, make your citation and all that kind of stuff. But we're not citing anything yet because we're just trying to see what's out there. So preliminary research, you could even put like Google and then just list bullet points of what they said. This is an American, that's an American, here's American controversies, here's what's going on in American current events, whatever. Wikipedia, students sometimes are surprised that an instructor would suggest that they go to Wikipedia. Wikipedia is awesome for a couple of reasons. One, it kind of operates like Google in the sense that it gives you summaries of content information. So if I looked up, apartheid in South Africa and I don't know what the word apartheid means, then I can go to Wikipedia and it will give me once I click on that Wikipedia page, it's like apartheid is, and then it just gives me the definition. Okay. The other cool thing about Wikipedia is that all these people who have written these articles have to list their sources, just like y'all are going to have to do when you do your formal papers. So at the end of every Wikipedia page, there's what's called a references page. And there's literal links like to PDFs, to articles, to websites, to organization websites. So like if it's the World Health Organization talking about apartheid, there will be a link to the World Health Organization's website, which is really useful because you can go look at their research and go look at what their publications are. So preliminary research is just really seeing what's out there. Okay, you take 5 to 10 minutes, throw it into Google, go to Wikipedia, see what bites you back, and then you're just writing summaries, right? You're just like, okay, this is kind of what this means. Formal research is the absolute last step of pre-writing, okay? So you do preliminary research first, and formal research is the last step of pre-writing steps. That's kind of redundant, the last step of pre-writing steps, but what I mean by that is like the 5, right? And this is where you go into your scholarly databases. Okay, so this is where you're going into, I don't know if you guys can see that, hopefully you can. You go into your scholarly databases. So a couple of things I want you to see with this. Number one, you have a crap ton of writing that you do before you even get to formal research, okay? And you guys will see this semester how that benefits you because you are not going into a database with no freaking clue of what you're writing on and then wasting an hour to 3 hours to half your life looking at articles that you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, so I don't know if I need that article or not, right? So pre-writing hones down, it narrows down the scope of your topic or the scope of your thesis or the scope of your discussion board. This is not just English, y'all, okay? Writing is everywhere. So therefore, pre-writing steps should be used across the board. This is not just for, English 111 or English 112. This is anytime you have a piece of writing, you do these 5 steps first to develop ideas, content generation, and then you can be really selective about what you pull. Okay, so you have a lot of steps that you go through before you even pull up a database or you talk to a librarian, which, side note, we have really incredible librarians here at Central Carolina. So I really, really encourage you guys, probably around the conversation part of your pre-writing, to go talk to one of our librarians. I always joke with my students, they have degrees in finding things, like in finding information across all realms, okay? So extremely, extremely competent people that we have. Go talk to them. We have a chat box on the CCCC website. If you click library, there's a chat box. Like in real time, you can speak to a librarian 24/7, okay? Okay, but then back to this. Formal research happens at the very, very end because you need to know what you're researching. Now, that being said, you guys have IRs, right? Your intellectual reaction paragraphs that we're working on. You're not going to have formal research for that. Like, unless you hear Caso say, like, go to a database, you're not going to be including this last formal research, but you will be doing preliminary research, if that makes sense, because you're always going to double check yourself with Google or Wikipedia. Okay? So hopefully that's all 5 steps in a nutshell. I just wanted to make sure that we had a video that explained each one in context, and then you guys knew kind of what the expectations were. So when you see pre-writing, all 5 steps, that includes brain dump, cluster, looping, right? Out of your own brain, you do that by yourself. Then you go talk to someone, conversation, and then you do preliminary research, okay? All right, hope that was helpful. I will see you all in class.